Hi, and thanks for joining me today. I'm Dr. Bridget Behe. I'm a professor of horticultural marketing at Michigan State University, and I'm delighted that you're joining us at the Carlin Buyer Fest for this presentation entitled Retail Better Practices Post-Pandemic. I'd like to start off by thanking the companies and entities that funded the research, some of which I'm going to share with you today. The Horticultural Research Institute, the USDA Federal State Marketing Improvement Program, Michigan State University's Project Green, as well as the Metro Detroit and Western Michigan flower growers and the Masterpiece Flower Company. I greatly appreciate the funding that made it possible for us to do the research. I want to start off by talking about a key word called value. If we look at the definition of marketing approved by the American Marketing Association in 2017, we see that marketing is the activity or the set of institutions or processes for creating, communicating, delivering, and exchanging offerings that have value. Now, that value could be for customers, clients, partners, and society at large, but really we're talking about this very important word value. Now, if you think about it, how do we communicate value? One of the ways that we tell somebody what something is worth is through the search attributes. And these things can be very easily evaluated before the customer makes the purchase. And on a plant, it would be things like foliage color or foliage shape or flower color or flower shape, and certainly the size of the plant or the size of the leaves and the flowers, but also the price. It's really tough to make a purchase if we don't know what the price is. Well, there are some other ways that we can communicate value, and we would call a second way experience attributes. They're experience attributes because they can only be evaluated after someone buys the product. So, for example, if they're buying greens, we would say that maybe arugula has a peppery flavor. Well, you can't tell that by looking at the arugula, but if you purchased it and ate some, you would experience that peppery flavor. Sweetness in peppers, crunch in other fresh produce, and then for the ornamentals, it could be things like fall color. Unless you're buying it in the fall, it's very tough to experience fall color. How long of a flowering period, that's a very experience attribute kind of thing. And then drought tolerance too. It's hard to tell by looking at a plant whether it's going to survive periods of water stress. And then the third way that we often communicate value are through what we would call credence attributes. Now, these are really tough to evaluate even after somebody buys the plant. And so consumers often rely on the plant brand or the reputation of the seller or the retailer. So, for example, you can't really tell by looking at a plant if it was grown in a sustainable manner, if it was grown organically. It's really tough to tell the carbon footprint of a plant if it's very intensive or if it's very limited. And then nutritional aspects are tough to determine simply by looking at a plant. And then, for sure, the benefits of a plant, the emotional benefits, the psychological benefits, the environmental benefits. These are all very difficult to assess simply by looking at the plant. Now, in marketing, in the retail setting, what do we tend to focus on? The search attributes, the experience attributes, or the credence attributes? Well, very often we focus on the search attributes because we're very good at the technical aspects of the plant. We're really good at saying, here's how far apart you plant it, here's how tall it's going to be, here's the genus and the species. But what really creates value is the credence attributes and the experience attributes, or why should I buy the plant? I want to play a very short video for you that Simon Sinek recorded. This is on YouTube, and I'm going to just play a very short excerpt, but it really emphasizes why we should start with why.
There's a pattern. As it turns out, all the great and inspiring leaders and organizations in the world, whether it's Apple or Martin Luther King or the Wright brothers, they all think, act, and communicate the exact same way, and it's the complete opposite to everyone else. All I did was codify it. And it's probably the world's simplest idea. I call it the golden circle. Why, how, what? This little idea explains why some organizations and some leaders are able to inspire where others aren't. Let me define the terms really quickly. Every single person, every single organization on the planet knows what they do, 100%. Some know how they do it, whether you call it your differentiating value proposition or your proprietary process or your USP. But very, very few people or organizations know why they do what they do. And by why, I don't mean to make a profit. That's a result. It's always a result. By why, I mean what's your purpose? What's your cause? What's your belief? Why does your organization exist? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? And why should anyone care? Well, as a result, the way we think, the way we act, the way we communicate is from the outside in. It's obvious. We go from the clearest thing to the fuzziest thing. But the inspired leaders and the inspired organizations, regardless of their size, regardless of their industry, all think, act, and communicate from the inside out. Let me give you an example. I use Apple because they're easy to understand and everybody gets it. If Apple were like everyone else, a marketing message from them might sound like this. We make great computers. They're beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. Want to buy one? Meh. And that's how most of us communicate. That's how most marketing is done, that's how most sales is done, and that's how most of us communicate interpersonally. We say what we do, we say how we're different or how we're better, and we expect some sort of behavior, a purchase, a vote, something like that. Here's our new law firm. We have the best lawyers with the biggest clients. We have, we always perform for our clients, do business with us. Here's our new car. It gets great gas mileage. It has, leather seats. Buy our car. But it's uninspiring. Here's how Apple actually communicates. Everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way we challenge the status quo is by making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. We just happen to make great computers. Want to buy one? Totally different, right? You're ready to buy a computer from me. All I did was reverse the order of the information. What it proves to us is that people don't buy what you do, people buy why you do it. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. This explains why every single person in this room is perfectly comfortable buying a computer from Apple. But we're also perfectly comfortable buying an MP3 player from Apple, or a phone from Apple, or a DVR from Apple.
So you see that why really exceeds what? Why. The why helps you create the value. And the why is really why people make the choice. I mean, the what, certainly what the plan is and the price and those search attributes absolutely help us make the choice. But why really creates the value. And so, especially in this post-pandemic era, we really need to be communicating the why before the what. And I have a sign here from Garson's over in England. I was fortunate enough to tour that in the fall of 2019. And here they're showing us the environmental benefits of plants. And this is a big part of the why people buy plants. That plants reduce pollution, that they provide food, they help remove chemicals and bacteria from water. They provide a habitat and food for wildlife. Trees and plants help reduce noise pollution. I mean, they're talking about all of the whys you should buy plants in general. So I want to focus for the next couple of minutes on this really important piece of why: the plant benefits, the emotional, the psychological, and the environmental benefits. And we did some research funded by the Horticultural Research Institute at the peak of the pandemic. So this was July 2020. We asked slightly over 1,000 U.S. consumers about the benefits that they derived from their plant purchases. And what you see are the Gen Z folks. They're the people born 1995 to 2015. In the green bar, the millennials born 1990 to 1984, the baby boomers born 1944 to 1964. They're in the red. We assessed the kinds of benefits that each of these groups got from the plants that they had purchased. And the first thing that really stands out is that Gen Z did not get any psychological benefits from their plants. Now, that's not to say that there were no psychological benefits to be gained. It's just that's not what they got from their interactions with their plants. The second thing that really stands out is this big yellow bar for the social benefits and also the educational benefits, and to a lesser extent the psychological benefits. Now, it was the millennials relative to the other two age groups that really got the most benefit. Rewind back to July of 2020. We were all sequestered, we were all locked down, and yet here are the millennials saying that they got social benefits from their plants. Well, what really is happening here is that the millennials were able to stay connected to their group, their tribe, their peer group, their friends, whatever you want to call that network. They were able to stay connected with them through their plants, and so they derived the greatest social benefit. They also got some physiological or exercise benefits, as well as learn something, the educational benefits, and to a lesser extent, they got psychological benefits, things like stress reduction. Now, we also noticed that the boomers were pretty negative on most of the bars, and so, again, it's not that they didn't get any benefits from the plants, they did, but the millennials really derived the most benefit, and it was social, educational, physiological to a lesser extent, and psychological even a little bit less than that. So we can capitalize on this perceived benefit that plants provide, especially to millennials, especially on social media. Now, Doctors Charlie Hall and Melinda Knuth have already done the homework for us. They published late in 2019 4 separate publications that appeared in the Journal of Environmental Horticulture, where they collected all the research-based evidence for the emotional and mental health benefits of plants, the physiological health benefits of plants, and the social benefits of plants. All we have to do is use that information and put it into action. So if you'd like a copy of those articles, they're free on Charlie's website, and I also have them available for free. Just send me an email at behe@msu.edu and ask for the plant benefits articles. Now, we also know from other research that environmental benefits are still very strong. A couple of years ago, Dr. Kristen Getter, myself, and Heidi Wolliger did some research to investigate which environmental benefits really resonated with consumers. And what we found was that people wanted to know that their plants were grown using bee-friendly insect management strategies. As a matter of fact, when we used the word protective neonicotinoids, it actually detracted from the perceived value of the plants, and then using traditional insect management practices detracted from the value even more. We found that using bee-friendly or protecting pollinators was worth up to 25 cents more compared to recycled potting media or recaptured water. So the environmental benefits are still quite important to many consumers. And Charlie and Mel, in those 4 articles that I pointed out, summarize those benefits as well. You know, there's some really good ways that we can use these different types of benefits in signage to remind people why they should be buying our plants. We see Mulbach's did a really nice sign with a butterfly oasis. It's not just butterfly plants, but you're creating an oasis. And the Royal Horticulture Society says, get your garden buzzing. One of the concerns that I've heard from some retailers is they're very reluctant to promote bees as pollinators. As a matter of fact, in the Wall Street Journal last week, there was an article about bees in Detroit and people being concerned about people bringing in hives. So maybe you talk about pollinators and the food that they provide or the habitat that they provide, but don't mention bees specifically, because people with allergies or people with concerns about being stung might be turned off a little bit by that. But certainly for the most part, many people want to support pollinator health, and they feel better about their environment if they can contribute in a positive way to the pollinator food and habitat. Something else we learned about environmental benefits was the words that we used. This was a study that Nikki McLaren, Pat Huddleston, Tom Fernandez, and I did, looking at where recycled water came from and how it influenced the perception of safety. And when we told people that the water came from a nursery, as opposed to not telling them where that recycled water came from or telling them that it did come from a residence, we were able to increase the perceived safety of the water. 1 is extremely risky and a 5 is extremely safe. So the words matter, and if you are recapturing your water, and you should be talking about that if you are, make sure that you say that the water came from your production nursery, your production greenhouse, so that people understand there's no concern over human waste being. Just as I showed on the opening slide, here's another picture from a British garden center talking about, the garden center's called Coolings, talking about them and the environment. They're showing pictures of growing on site. They're talking about recapturing and recycling the water. They're talking about recycling containers and using sustainable potting mix, as well as contributing to the pollinator habitat themselves. And so when you think about these things and reflect back on that definition of value from the American Marketing Association, when we can connect with consumers on the environment or on other benefits like mental health, emotional health and well-being, physical health, we're going to connect with them more strongly on the why. Here are some other signs where we see Aliette is promoting that they grow their plants on their own nursery. Locally grown has been a much stronger marketing force when we support local businesses, especially coming out of the pandemic. We know that we're supporting our friends and neighbors. But we need to be reminding our customers that we are using locally grown or regionally grown products and local labor, if that is what we're using. Reminding them that we're local businesses is essential in this post-pandemic era. And then, like I said, from the articles that Charlie Hall and Melinda Knuth put together, talking about the physical benefits, the emotional benefits, the mental health and well-being benefits, reminding customers about all of the things, all of the whys, why they should buy plants and why they can benefit them in their daily lives. We see this more and more, particularly emerging after the pandemic. For better health, just head outdoors. This was an article from the Wall Street Journal a few months ago. There's really an urgent and emerging science and at the gut level to increase the nature experience. And that's really what we're selling. We're selling that experience with plants and with nature. Again, having some signage like this where we're reminding customers, and these are some excerpts from Charlie Hall and Melinda Knuth's articles, You might want to keep your distance, but not from plants. Did you know that time spent in natural settings can help reduce mental fatigue, recovery time, and improve concentration levels? These are a couple of studies right out of Charlie and Mel's articles. Did you know that recent studies show that immunity from illnesses can be enhanced by viewing, interacting with, or even being in the vicinity of plants? And you could point to the references in Charlie and Mel's articles as you promote this, either in your store, on your website, or in any communication material but most especially on social media. Now I want to turn to some better practices for signage. In some of the work that we've done using our eye tracking glasses, we have learned that people find the information that they want very quickly. For the most part, people rely on what kind of plant it is, and if that was the way that they made their decision, they actually saw the plant material faster than people who made their purchase decision based on how that plant was grown or the price of the plant. It's also interesting that people who made their decision based on how that plant was grown saw that information faster on the sign compared to the other two groups. And what do you think happened with price? People who made their decision primarily based on price physiologically saw that information faster than the other two groups. We also investigated how much information and what kind of information that people should put on a sign. In this particular study, we identified 15 signs. 3 of them we determined were low complexity, so they don't have very many type fonts, they don't have images. The moderately complex signs have a few more type fonts, a few more different sizes, and some minimal graphics. And the high complexity signs had a lot of different size fonts, a lot of imagery, and a lot of just different things going on. So we wanted to understand which kind of sign help facilitate purchases the most. So as we went from low to moderate to high complexity, the likelihood for somebody to buy a plant went up. They also found the highly complex signs more attractive compared to the low or the moderate. However, people don't read all of the information on the high complexity signs. In fact, the sweet spot was for the moderately complex signs. And we saw something similar for the amount of time that they spent reading. It was the moderately complex sign that they spent the most time reading. So, how can you put the information from those two studies into practice? Well, consumers liked complex signs more than simple or moderately complex signs, but they were more likely to buy something when that sign had a lot of information. Now, what we think is happening here is that they're cherry picking the information. Remember, they didn't read it all. They didn't spend most of their time reading the highly complex sign. It was the moderately complex sign. So what we think is happening here is consumers want to know more, but they don't always read it. They're cherry picking that information. And so, too, I think it's important to not have all the same kind of sign. We want some sign diversity because we're also wired to see the differences. Now, when we think back, too, about some of the whys, what the plant can do for the customer also answers the question why. And these were some really nice signs from Stewart's, another garden center over in England. Plants for all year greenery, plants for coastal areas, and plants for heavy wet soil. And if you think about it, this is really a solution-based sign where we're putting together a collection of plants that really help to solve a problem. It kind of is like the sun plants and the shade plants, but it really goes a step further in very big, very bold type to show people what the problem is that they're trying to solve. If you want to screen the unsightly neighbor or a road, or you want to reduce the noise pollution, the all-year greenery or the evergreens might be the solution for you. If you have heavy, wet soil, still, that has a fair amount of sunshine, here's a collection of plants that would tolerate a clay soil or a heavier soil that might have water standing or be wetter for a longer period of time. And also in terms of signage, do not forget the staff picks. I mean, there are so many kinds of retailers that use staff picks, from bookstores to wine stores. Why not have a staff pick section where your customers can go to find the plants that your professionals, that your employees really find as some of their favorites? And I like a color contrast too. These are some fixtures at Cootsier's, a retailer here in Michigan. And I want you to just see how this light green really pops against the darker fixture. Notice too that we have a little bit lower end cap, and just make sure we're not creating a tripping hazard here. But it gives us the opportunity then to look down on that container as though it were planted in the garden. So looking ahead to spring of 2022, what are some of the market trends? What are some of the things that consumers are going to be looking for to buy in spring of next year? Well, I think one of the things is bundling products, packaging them, putting them together in a set, or however you're going to call it. There seems to be two camps emerging from the pandemic: the people who have fared pretty well and others who have not. And so I think we're going to see an increase in demand for DIY products. And I really like these packages here, particularly because they're color coded. We still see a lot of people buying a lot of plants by color. And so separating plants into sun plants and shade plants, and then looking at different collections or packages or units, this brilliant bling, I would encourage you to name them, because people want to come back the following year, and if they want to get the same thing, they'll say, oh, you remember that red container or that container that had pink flowers, and you'll say, well, we had several. So naming them and having some bundles or packages or collections, or however you want to call them, I think is a really good move for next year. Now, Bourdain's many years ago, during one of the recessions, put this display together, and what you can see here is the Sunny Sundays mix. So here's a finished container, and notice there aren't too many left in here, but then there are quite a few bundles or packages, and this sign contains the information. Should have benefits in there, but it contains information about what specifically the plants are. And there's really no doubt about where you're supposed to plant this collection. It's a sunny plant mix. So a very nice display where you have some of the containers that are already pre-planted and finished, and you've got a lot more packages or collections, or however you're going to call them. Vegetable gardening. The food trend is going to continue to grow. People wanted to grow food during the pandemic to increase their food security. It wasn't that they were hungry, it was that they were afraid that they didn't have access to fresh vegetables. And this was an article from the Wall Street Journal much earlier this year. It was interesting that one of the people interviewed for the article said, what I like is the growing and the doing. I don't actually like vegetables. Well, I think they're in the minority, because most people who grow vegetables grow them to get the products of what it is that they're growing. We hear a lot about plant-based diets and about functional foods, and yet what we should be doing is putting some creative containers together. Here's a salad bowl and a hanging basket. So if you do have limited space in an apartment or a condo, you could find maybe a place to hang this for a short period of time. And I also like integrating edible flowers in with the salad bowls. And one of the things that we found from some survey research we did last year was that people who bought both edible plants and ornamental plants actually reaped more benefits compared to people who just purchased either one or the other. And herbs, we can't forget herbs and herb collections or herb gardens or herb containers. We could put nasturtiums or marigolds in there as well and create both a functional and a pretty container. One of the things that we found from our research last year was that millennials were bored and were looking for something to do. And so to embrace the boredom proneness, you might try in some of your online communications or in your in-store communications, encouraging people to try something new or have a change of pace with your tomatoes or get out of your tomato rut. And I think if you position some new cultivars, particularly we know the smaller vegetable cultivars are going to be hot next year as well, to encourage them to try some of those smaller cultivars in plants or planters. And as I said, food security was an issue last year. People were not hungry, but they were concerned about having access to fresh vegetables. And we know that local is a very important piece in terms of purchases coming out of the pandemic. People want to support local businesses. And you can help them grow local and have some control over what they eat by planting some mixed containers that have both vegetables and herbs, or maybe vegetables and flowers as close as their back door. You know, it doesn't get any more local than your back door. Communicating messaging about food security, growing local, and capitalizing on some of the boredom, helping them to get out of a rut or have a change of pace with cultivars can be highly effective. And of course, cocktail gardens are really, really hot right now, and I suspect they will be again next year. And thinking about growing your own cocktail garden and even having some mocktail parties or cocktail parties online can be a very interesting trend to capitalize on. Now, here's where both with vegetables and with cocktails, pointing people to some recipes or asking people to share recipes through social media, that will really help engage consumers in a conversation, something that's fun, that most people would enjoy a mocktail party or a cocktail party. It's something just a little bit different. And so you can really engage them in social media, not just sell the plant. We have a huge opportunity to help alleviate food boredom by providing customers with recipes. I talked about cocktail recipes. A lot of people were cooking at home during the pandemic. I think some of that is going to persist. But one of the challenges with growing your own produce is, what do I do with all those tomatoes? What do I do with all this basil? And so asking them for recipes or sharing recipes, especially online, especially when all the tomatoes come ripe, or you've got an overload of zucchini squash. Everybody has problems because that one zucchini can feed a neighborhood. But sharing those recipes online can help people get out of a food rut. It can make you the central pivot for conversations about food, and it can also steer people to your operation to buy those plants. Selection by color is still going to drive a lot of choices, but we do have some tremendous opportunities to integrate plants across botanical lines. We're kind of used to seeing tropicals now, but what we don't see very often are flowering shrubs integrated with annuals and perennials. And the reason that I say this is I think we could sell a lot more flowering shrubs if we integrated them with annuals and perennials, even some of the edible plants. Think about integrating in a larger container some small flowering shrubs. Of course, we're not going to guarantee them to persist into the next season. We're going to merchandise them as an annual container. but it really could capture some attention and maybe sell a few larger containers. And as I said before with some of the plant material, we are going to shop not just by color, but making packages. And so I really like this collection from Countryside. They have the blue containers massed together, and they have a fairly monochromatic planting in that container. One of the cool things that Garden Crossings did was to hang a color wheel up above in their retail space, and that helped their retail staff talk about direct contrast, which is opposites on the color wheel, or a more monochromatic, a subtle contrast where we're looking beside the color wheel. And we can see, not just with plant material, but we can integrate fixtures, and we can also integrate products that are on sale beside some of the plants, and that is a positive look. People might want to buy that whole unit and take that home. Small plants are going to be really big still next year, and one of the reasons for this is, especially among millennials, younger consumers, you can make a collection. You can have several. It is not necessarily about buying one big one, but of having a collection of plants, maybe in similar containers, maybe in a little bit different container. But a lot of succulents and foliage plants, particularly in 3 and 4 inch containers, are going to continue to be hot items into 2022. You really need to think about products, groups, collections, bundles, packages, where you're combining the demand for both food products and pretty products. And here's an opportunity to incorporate some lower margin items, maybe to move some inventory that has sat around for too long and make that part of the package. And as I said earlier, incorporating shrubs into some larger mixed containers. There are some great examples on the IGC Talk Facebook group, and if you're an independent garden retailer, I would encourage you to check that out and maybe become a member of that IGC Facebook group. And then always communicate. You know, show and tell worked really well in kindergarten, and it works now because we all have a cell phone with a camera and social media, and those two combined are powerful, powerful marketing allies. Now, as we continue to emerge from the pandemic, people who used some of these services, we see a majority of them would like to see those services continue to be offered. People had gotten used to the opportunity to pick up by curbside or have items delivered and have contactless payment. And I don't see any of these really declining in terms of overall demand. They probably are going to be increasing. In fact, the e-commerce habits of the United States are continuing to deepen. You'll see this dramatic increase from about 8% to about 15% in the years right up to the pandemic. And what this graph represents is the increase in e-commerce or online sales as a percentage of total retail sales. And we know that that is probably going to continue to increase from about 15% to closer to 20% over time. People are cultivating this habit of convenience. So we need to be thinking, especially for 22, how are the online orders going with our business? And you don't necessarily have to put everything online. You could have a limited inventory. You could have a takeout menu where it is only specific selections from your retail space that are available online. There are still many customers who are not comfortable placing an order online, and they want to be able to call and to have an order taken by phone. If you're limited on phone lines, this is a real easy fix to buy some burner phones and call people back. You can get their telephone number and then arrange a time to call them back. But the convenience of ordering remotely is not going to go away. And I think this is especially true for customers who you have a good relationship with. Maybe they have mobility issues, maybe they have young children, and it's not real convenient for them to come in and do some shopping. And so these are two very convenient ways that a lot of other retailers are offering, and we should be considering keeping these kinds of convenient sales as options for some of our customers. You know, many industries feature our products in their advertisements. This is an advertisement for WeatherTech. And so as other industries give us more exposure, we have kind of some built-in advertising that is relatively free. So thinking about the online store, you might have a very limited selection with a takeout menu. A lot of retailers started by selling gift cards and mulch and taking payment online, and then see what is working for you, because curbside pickup could continue to work, or you might think about delivery. And we know the convenience of food delivery, whether it's groceries or food prepared in the restaurant. And many people are used to paying an upcharge for that convenience. So please don't do these things at a loss, but think about selling them with a bit of an upcharge so that you can make some money and have some profit from this. And so what does your takeout menu look like? Maybe you have a cocktail container with mint and basil. Maybe you have a salad bowl. Maybe you have an upscale container for the sun that includes a flowering shrub, a perennial, and some annuals. And remember, not all of your inventory needs to be posted online. You could put some of the bigger ticket, higher margin items, and if you want, you could put gift cards and mulch and some of the other hard goods available online, but you don't have to put everything online. Another option might be a video concierge, where people make an appointment with you. You could use a scheduling software. Perhaps you're going to put a minimum order or add $25 or a percentage. And you would call them back with a phone that you could walk around and video chat. They could place the order. You could put that order in a cart, and maybe if they're going to pick it up, you've got a couple of parking stalls where you have a number on and they can call or text to pick those up. And then you might consider about delivery. And if you do, I really enjoy when Amazon delivers my package and they show me a picture of my package on my front door. That way I know that they're there. So these are some options that not all customers, but some customers might want, but price it in a way that you can make a profit on it. Curbside pickup is not trivial. And when people call or order online, we need to help manage those expectations. So let's have a couple of stalls that have a sign for the phone number where people could call or text. That way you know that they're out there. And maybe curbside pickup is only available certain days. Maybe it's Tuesday afternoon for orders placed before Monday at 5 or close of business. You don't have to do this all the time every day. You can help manage the ordering and the pickup by setting some specific hours, perhaps when you've got a little bit of labor, because this is not a trivial thing to do. And then thinking about delivery for people who either call or place an online order. And I really like the call or the text that shows that the delivery was made. Why should you have both curbside pickup and delivery options? Because some people want to get out of the house safely and still are concerned and want that curbside pickup, but others want to stay in the safety and convenience of their home. So I think it's important that you examine how you do both and consider having or continue to have both. And then continue to have good checkout cash register practices where you're covering your nose and your mouth. Maybe you have signs up there. Judy Sharpton talks about clearing the counter near the cash register, getting rid of a lot of things that are positioned right up at the cash register so that people can put their things down. You might still have the dots to space people out. And I think the limits on the number of people in the store have gone by the wayside. But I think it continues to be important that if you can avoid handling the cash or tap to purchase on the credit card machine, those are the kinds of things that people are going to be looking for. our memories can be pretty long with coronavirus. And so continuing to be a visible, clean, very aware store that you're trying to continue those safety precautions to keep your customers and employees safe is going to continue to be really important moving forward. Customers want to feel safe, and retailers need to communicate that. When they see obvious cleaning efforts, it helps them feel safe. People feel safer when they see other stores cleaning and trying to keep them safe. Perceptions really do matter. And then to finish up, make sure that you thank people for your business. These two signs are from Schwartz's down in southeastern Michigan. They're very good at attracting attention. Thank you for buying locally at Schwartz's. These are all Michigan grown. They're kind of close to the Ohio border, so they're very proud to talk about their local plant production. But thanking people for their purchase goes a long way, especially in today's economy. I'm going to finish up by really emphasizing the social benefits that plants bring. And I excerpted a piece from Charlie Hall and Melinda Knuth's article. It says, the reason these social benefits of plants are so important is that when social bonds are severed or simply absent, society suffers. At a time when the polarization and fragmentation of society is of growing concern, we need to actively seek ways to strengthen human connections among us and build stronger communities. And this really, it was published before the pandemic, but it really is especially true today. Plants really bring us together, and we need to emphasize that in our social media. And I think it's important too to offer some things online even as we emerge from the pandemic. Would you rather go to a party or a class? What are some of the things that could be converted? And think about parties rather than classes. Maybe you put a package together for that. Maybe you have curbside pickup or delivery. But if you use an interactive software, attendees can ask questions and interact in a safe manner. You could use Facebook Live. You could record it to use it in future seminars, depending upon the consent of the people who are there. But if you're giving a seminar or a session, certainly think about recording it and then maybe being able to offer that in the future. But online is not going to go away. Online communications are going to continue to grow. I'll finish here by pointing out some of the Marketing Munchies podcasts. This is my free weekly podcast that's available on my website, www.connect-to-consumer.com. Some of these podcasts might be helpful to you and give you a little bit more information and go into a little bit more detail about some of the things that I talked about today. I really appreciate your time and attention today, and I am here if you have any questions, or you can email me at behe.msu.edu. Thanks very much.